72% of clients felt like they received outstanding service when their phone call was answered.
People want to talk to people. It's critical to feel like you're connecting to another person now more than ever.
Nearly half of the firms in this experiment didn't answer the phone.
We've built a phone system that's all about helping law firms communicate better and automate the admin work they're kind of stuck with by connecting that directly with their case management systems. So essentially, it's like we're tackling a lot of the issues the report talks about, especially when it comes to providing excellent client service and finding ways we can automate those repetitive tasks.
Today's episode is sponsored by VXT, the phone system built for law firms. VXT integrates with practice management systems so that when lawyers make calls, their billable time and legal advice can be saved in the right place automatically. 20% of billable time goes unrecorded. A lot of that is phone calls that get forgotten about. Get some of those billables back using VXT. Go to vxt.co.nz or click the link in the description to find out more.
Welcome back to another episode of the File Notes podcast. For our regular listeners, you may be familiar with the man on the screen, William Burry, from our previous episode about ALTMA, another legal conference that we were recently at in Brisbane. But for those that don't know William, he is the CRO at VXT, and he's recently been at ClioCon. And today we're going to dive into everything ClioCon and the Legal Trends Report that has just been released. But before we dive in, let's set the stage. ClioCon is one of the biggest legal conferences out there, and Clio itself is the largest case management system in North America. They've just completed a $900 million raise, which is the largest legal tech raise ever in history, which is insane. So, William, you've been to quite a few conferences, but this was your first ClioCon. What was your first impressions?
It was really impressive. I think Clio really nailed showcasing themselves. They had sections where people could learn about different parts of the product, speak to experts, but I also feel like they did a great job at providing a lot of really cool and exciting speaking events for the attendees to go to. But also I can't pass up the opportunity to talk about Austin as well. So it was a fantastic city. My first time in Austin. Very hot compared to New Zealand, but it was cool getting to explore the city around the conference too.
Do you have any highlights whilst you were there? I heard that the barbecues there are pretty great.
Yeah, Texas is famous for its American style barbecue, which turns out New Zealand's actually adopted a little bit since kind of your pre-COVID as well. Somewhat familiar with it here, but it was really cool going to the heart of barbecue and trying some of Franklin's barbecue there, which is really famous. And a colleague and I also got to see the bats, which everyone we spoke to about what we should do in Austin highly recommended going to watch the bats fly at sunset, which was really sweltering 34 degrees Celsius and standing under a bridge waiting for some bats to fly off. It was a great way to spend the evening.
Interesting. So another interesting aspect of this ClioCon was that it was in Austin, like you said, which is actually the home territory of Afinapay, the parent company of MyCase, which is another integration partner of VXT. And Afinapay did something quite cool here. They really seized the opportunity of being on home turf because they actually don't have their own conference themselves and did some guerrilla marketing. So guerrilla marketing is an unconventional way to promote yourself, or I like to call it just doing something really rogue. You were on the ground, you would have seen what was going on. What was Afinapay doing to guerrilla market at ClioCon?
It was really clever. When I landed at Austin Airport, they had banners welcoming legal professionals to their hometown. They had branded up and hired these kind of pedicabs offering rides around the conference, around the ClioCon conference. And then one of the nights they ran a party featuring renowned chef Aaron Franklin, and they held that on the second night of ClioCon as well, in direct competition with one of Clio's events as well, which was very exciting, and hats off to them for thinking outside of the box.
Yeah, and all in good spirits, right?
Yeah, of course.
So now let's get into this legal trends report, which I think was a fantastic report. We were just speaking before we started recording this that it's one that all legal professionals should read. It was really easy to consume and seemed to be like all the topics that people are talking about at the moment, mainly automation and improving client experience. So before we delve into sharing all these statistics that we found interesting, I just want to share where these statistics were drawn from. So to come up with this report, Clio interviewed over 1,000 legal professionals, 1,400 Clio customers, and 1,000 people from the general population who might be consumers or future consumers of legal services. And they also did a secret shopper experiment or survey of 500 law firms. You're familiar with the report. What stood out to you?
I found it was really interesting. A lot of the findings that they highlighted and things that they really dived into were a lot of things that kind of we at VXT are focusing on and noticing in our own kind of engagements with the legal market. Essentially, we've built a phone system that's all about helping law firms communicate better and automate the admin work they're kind of stuck with by connecting that directly with their case management systems. So essentially, it's like we're tackling a lot of the issues the report talks about, especially when it comes to providing excellent client service and finding ways we can automate those repetitive tasks. So yeah, excited to share some real world examples of how VXT can make life easier for firms as we chat deeper into the report.
I think we said in our Outma episode that one of your favorite sessions you went to was with Laura Vickers because she gave a talk but gave really practical examples, and you came away from that saying it was such an awesome presentation. So hopefully we can give some practical examples that can go alongside this data in the Clio Legal Trends Report. So starting off with automation, as you just mentioned that, one of the statistics was that 74% of law firms' billable tasks are able to be automated. And I'm sure all law firms would love to be able to automate 74% of their tasks. So can you tell me what kind of tasks we're talking about here?
Yeah, I think in essence, the tasks that are the easiest to automate tend to be repetitive or follow like a clear process. A good example of tasks that's potentially harder to automate might be like negotiating settlement, where understanding the emotions and adjusting the strategy in real time is key. And very challenging to be automated for systems and processes, but something like taking notes from a call and saving them to a case in Clio is much more suited for automation as well. Take VXT, for instance. Attorneys use our software. We're making and receiving calls, which are automatically recorded, transcribed, and summarized using AI. And these notes are directly saved to cases in Clio. What we see, this cuts down about 5 to 10 minutes per phone call. And this type of automation, and this is the type of automation that a lot of firms are really looking towards at adopting going into 2025.
Definitely. Yeah, it's all about those incremental gains. If you think that attorneys bill in 6-minute increments, you save 5 or 10 minutes here and there, or per every phone call, it really does add up. And I know I just mentioned 6-minute increments. Another big takeaway from the report was that automation is really shaking up the billable hour model. And it makes sense, right? If automation can handle tasks that attorney would usually be doing, how do you track and bill for that? You can't really do it like firms have been doing it for forever, right? But then at the same time, they should still be getting paid for the value that they're providing. But that's just going to have to look different. So that's a big question of how that's going to eventuate. But William, I'm interested, you're talking to firms every day. Are you seeing more firms moving to a fixed fee or value-based billing model?
I think so. There definitely is a clear divide. I think what's probably the most common and what we're seeing is a firm will do a combination of both depending on the type of work they're doing, especially in general practice, but within more specialized firms committing to one or the other. I think in both camps, whether you're doing your kind of time-based or fixed fee, understanding the time going into the work you're doing is really crucial to essentially ensure that you're charging a fair amount for the work that's being put in. There were some really interesting statistics in this report here as well. Clients are happier and more likely to pay their bills on time, which is fixed fees, which was something that I hadn't considered before and was really interesting to understand. And firms billing with flat fees get their bills 5 times faster than those billing hourly, which is speed to market and efficiency around that is a huge drive. So it sounds like a really appealing reason to go to that fixed fee model.
I found those statistics super compelling. Like you said, I hadn't really thought of that perspective either, but it's a super important and thing to consider in firms because cash flow is super important in these times. So something else I read in this report relating to the fixed fees and the move to fixed fees is that it's really going to force firms to seek out efficiencies. Once they move from the billable hour, there's a natural incentive to create a simple process that can be repeated and therefore automated as much as possible. And then there's that financial incentive behind it as well, where the more efficiently you can complete that work, then the more profitable your firm can come as well.
I think it's a really interesting observation. It's not saying that we run into directly, but definitely is a huge drive for constant efficiencies on both sides of the kind of the billable model, where those who are billing hourly typically aren't billing often for the kind of the data entry work they're doing. So increasing that efficiency there is also really valuable. But yeah, definitely on both camps.
So what we've spoken about so far has focused on the law firm side, but a massive part of this report was focusing on client experience. So I want to switch track to talk about that now. And the stat I want to start with is that 72% of clients felt like they received outstanding service when their phone call was answered. And that's compared to only 22% when they contacted the firm via email or 26% via an intake form. What's your initial thoughts on this? And maybe you can also here give us an example of how VXT as a legal phone system actually helps.
I think that's a really interesting stat. I think law firms are really there's a lot of phone calls going into a firm. Some of them from clients, large volume of them not. And I think law firms are responding to that by making it harder to speak to someone on the phone, having to fill out forms or emails, or even potentially being directed to a contact center first. But I think especially in a post-COVID world, people want to talk to people. It's critical, to feel like you're connecting to another person. I guess now more than ever. And one of the great things like VXT is doing in this space is because we're connecting with your practice management system, your team knows if a client's calling or if, for example, like an external party is calling as well. And it makes it really easy to evaluate whether you should be answering that phone call or potentially letting it slide out to your outsourced team. But yeah, definitely prioritizing that client experience.
And I think also if you're calling an attorney, you're probably in a pretty stressful situation.
Mm.
Like there's a whole range of things that could be happen, like terrible events or divorces or stressful business situations. You need to be able to just talk to someone straight away. You get so much built up frustration if you're trying to talk to a form and you don't know how long it's going to take for you to reply or if this attorney can actually help you. So I definitely can see how that statistic comes to light. So the stat that actually blew me away the most, and I shared a little graphic about this on our VXT LinkedIn already because I was pretty baffled, was that in the secret shopper survey that Clio did, where they tried to get in contact with 500 different law firms, nearly half of the firms in this experiment didn't answer the phone to a potential client that was calling. That's like a massive amount of calls not being answered. And that's potential for new business as well, just going down the drain because you probably just move on to the next law firm on the Google search or on the directory. Why do you think law firms aren't answering the phone?
I think, yeah, as you said, that's it was a baffling stat and definitely much lower than I actually would have intuitively thought prior to reading the report. But I think that touches back to what I was saying before, right? I feel like law firms are receiving a lot of phone calls from people who aren't clients or aren't potential clients and are building processes to essentially insulate themselves from that experience. On top of that, attorneys are busy people and sometimes essentially just avoid answering the phone because they're actually working on other cases, other matters at the moment. And this big drive for efficiencies on the kind of the revenue side of the firm is really pushing that kind of insulation away from the direct client phone calls or that kind of ad hoc work. And yeah, as I said before, one of the great things about VXT is that contact sync. You know if a client's calling, you know if a non-client's calling, and you can really evaluate it on a call-by-call basis whether you want to pick up that phone and speak to your clients or not.
Yeah. And I think there's some other things in VXT as well, like analytics is super important.
Mm.
And I know other phone systems have this as well, but it's a super important thing to drill into where you can see actually why your attorneys are missing calls. Is it one person? Are they overworked or are they just deciding not to answer the call? And say if they are overworked, then there's some kind of things you can do about that relating to call flows and support maybe outside of the phone system itself.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. I was talking to a law firm earlier today, actually, who are like obsessed about their client experience and analyzing that through analytics. And one figure that they usually championed above all others was how long does it take on average for a client to be answered, for a client's phone call to get answered? And I think that stat is a really great way of reinforcing that client experience that you want. And then, as Sophie rightly mentioned, you can build a call flow and an intake process to help manage those stats. But understanding that data is critical to delivering that client experience.
And similar to phone calls, there was a statistic about emails as well. And that was also worrying. It was that 67% of those law firms didn't respond to emails. And so the phones I get, maybe you're busy, but an email is there and it's permanent right in front of you. But 67% of them didn't get responded to, which baffles me again. And now you're our CRO, so you're dealing with emails all the time and outreach and response rates. Would love your insights on this.
Yeah, I think speaking from a sales perspective, a 33% reply rate would be incredible. Given it's a client email, you'd expect that to be a markedly higher than numbers we're currently seeing there. But again, I think that touches back to what I'm saying before. People are receiving a lot of emails, a lot of notifications, and it's really drowning out the kind of clients in the inbox. And again, potentially attorneys are just really busy at the moment, and it's easy just to push an email back into the pile and get back to it later.
So going back to the phone call track we were on, in the legal industry, referrals are one of or are the largest source of new business for law firms. And when people in the survey were asked about whether they would promote a law firm that they interacted with, 39% of clients said that they are likely to promote a law firm if their phone call was answered, compared to just 12% for other methods like chatbots. So answering the phone is super important for client experience, but it's also super important for business.
Again, I think it circles back to what we spoke about before, is people really want to be connecting with other people, especially in this incredibly digital world where you're on Zoom meetings, you're listening to podcasts, you're engaging with AI chatbots. People really want to know that when they are in a Sophie mentioned before, a really stressful time of their life, and they need someone out there on the phone who's compassionate, empathetic, and understanding, they can get through to them. And I can imagine that definitely leads through into how likely someone is to refer that. But for sure, on the flip side of that, I also read that when firms fail to answer the call, 73% of clients become detractors, but this drops to 38% if the call is answered. So being engaged with your clients is definitely more important now than ever.
So the gap between 73% of clients becoming detractors, dropping down to 38% if the call was answered, is massive. So here I'd like to do a bit of a summary, tying in the ways that VXT's legal phone system can help, because I genuinely think that we are solving a lot of the problems in this report. Do you just want to give a summary to round us off?
Yeah, definitely. I think in summary, law firms need to be answering client calls more than they are today. I think the stats prove it themselves, right? 73%, dropping down to 38% is a massive difference. And I think there's a couple things that go into that. And we said before, there's a lot of phone calls going into law firms today that aren't clients. So you're using software to be able to filter that out, so you can ensure that your clients are prioritized as they should be. And as Sophie mentioned, VXT has a lot of technology that can essentially suppress non-clients, elevate clients, but also inform you which of your clients are calling as well. It could be a resourcing issue. It could be a processes issue. But until you look at the analytics and the data going into that, it's really hard to understand how you can deliver the best client experience.
Thank you so much. This was a great chat about the Legal Trends Report. I know that VXT will be putting a lot more content out about this report. So if you would like to see more of that, you can go to vxt.co.nz. So I hope you all enjoyed this wrap up. But otherwise, until next ClioCon.
In Boston, I hear, so incredibly excited.
Exactly. See you there.
See you there. Thanks so much.